Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Todd Tooney. I'm the Vice Chair of the Columbus Metropolitan Board of Trustees. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the new year of CMC Forums. Please silence your phones, put them on vibrate, but don't get rid of them because we want to make sure that you tweet, and our hashtag is #CMC Forum. You can follow us also on CMC at C-Bus Metro Club. We have some upcoming forums. We are excited that we have some great programs for you next week. Join us as we examine the proposed budget for the state of Ohio with Tim Keene, Budget Director for the state of Ohio, and Joe Testa, the Tax Commissioner for the state of Ohio, and Terry Thomas, who's an author. The discussion will be moderated by John Bigala, Executive Director of the Center for Community Solutions. This upcoming forum is sponsored by the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation. If you're looking for other upcoming events, please download the new app. I have it on my cell phone. Or visit our website, columbusmetroclub.org. Does anyone else have our app downloaded? There's plenty of opportunity there. I'd like to invite you to help us reach out our goal of 1,000 members this year. That was a goal set by our board. As a member, you will receive discounts on weekly forums and many other tangible benefits, as well as many opportunities to network with friends that you'll make. In the forum flyer is a list of everyone who's attending today. Please take a look at it. Why not just do it? Take a minute after today's forum and move your name from guest list to membership list. Membership is easy and affordable and on our website at columbusmetroclub.org. On the back of your forum program, please recognize nearly 80 companies and organizations who help sustain CMC and our mission of community conversation through sponsorship. The benefits of sponsorship are many, and there is always room for more. Please let us know if you're interested in more information about the rewarding opportunity. Now to the meaty part, the introduction of our guests and speakers. A biography of each speaker is in your forum flyer, so I will provide only brief introductions. Our first panelist is a professor of food science and technology and the director of Food Innovation Center at The Ohio State University. Please welcome Ken Lee. Our next panelist has led the MidOhio Food Bank since 1984 and currently serves as the president and CEO. I should say my president and CEO, seeing that I'm a member of the board of the MidOhio Food Bank. He held a seat on Columbus City Council from 1993 to 2006, including this last 7 years as president of the council. Please welcome Matt Habish. Thank you. And our moderator for today is the Vice President of Community Impact for United Way of Central Ohio. She's also a friend of mine. Please welcome Dawn Tyler Lee. On behalf of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, please welcome all of our panelists. And Dawn, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Todd. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. It's my honor to moderate this conversation about a very important issue in our community. I had the privilege of working under the leadership of Matt Habash when I was a legislative aide at Columbus City Council, and I just left an 8-year career at the university, so I feel a connection to my co-panelists and am proud to share the stage with them this evening. So let me just frame our conversation a little bit before we jump right into some questions of our panelists. Food is a basic need in our community, affecting everything from education to health to safety. To sustain a projected 8 billion people by 2025, world food production must increase by a staggering 40%, while we currently lose about 40% of our food to flaws in process, economics, safety, health, nutrition, security, technology, and policy. It has been suggested that there is a parallel between disparities in food access and healthcare access. Through a continued partnership with MidOhio Food Bank, the Food Innovation Center's Food Security Initiative seeks to improve access to culturally appropriate, health-promoting foods for food-insecure families across Central Ohio. They do this by impacting food availability, food access, food quality, and food use. The Food Innovation Center experts in social work, public health, crop science, medicine, policy, and business hope to add value to the food bank's processes to increase food security in vulnerable populations. So Dr. Lee, I'll start with you. I'm intrigued by the first sentence that I saw on the Food Innovation Center website when I took a look at it, and it says, the Food Innovation Center specializes in innovative ways to improve the human condition by way of food. That is a tall order. Tell us more about what it means.
Well, Dawn, thanks for the very good reference to the website, fic.osu.edu, if anyone wants to go there. It's clear you did your homework, and also want to thank the Columbus Metro Club for inviting us. It's a very important subject because food is one of the, I like to tell my students, one of the 3 most intimate acts they do on a daily basis. And everyone understands food, but not everyone understands the immediacy of the issue, which is, of course, feeding the 8 billion people on this planet by the year 2025, as you mentioned. So there's a lot of innovative ways to improve the food supply, and that's what's exciting about working with Matt Havish, because one of the things that we must do is ensure that we have a secure food future, both locally and globally. There's currently food insufficiency around the world, but also here in Ohio. And we have the resources, we have the technology, we have the means to put an end to that. And that's what would really be innovative about food innovation.
So, you know, people in this room are obviously attracted to this topic, but I would venture to guess that the general public may not really think about hunger as an issue. Matt, can you tell us how hunger is an issue in our community and what we're doing about it?
Nationally, we're MidOhio Food Bank's part of a organization called Feeding America. It used to be called Second Harvest. There are 200 food banks around the country, and they did a gap analysis in terms of food insecurity, which is a USDA term to determine how hungry somebody is. And for the 20 counties that we serve, which is basically Central and Eastern Ohio, we are 66 million meals short annually of making everybody in those 20 counties food secure. Now, put that in perspective for you. Last year, we distributed 37 million meals annually. So we have a long way to go in terms of recognizing the number of people in our communities throughout, and that is indicative throughout the United States in terms of the number of people that are food insecure in this country. And I really do believe it's connected to health. I think that's, for us, food is health. And that's been, if there's been a change, at the food bank, and what you have, everybody has the annual report, it's the change. Most of us don't have the image that food banks give out fresh food, produce, and perishable foods. It's now more than half of the 46 million pounds of food that we gave out last year is fresh food. And when you want to talk about making connections, annually, the data that we have suggests that there's between 3 and 6 billion pounds of fresh produce every year left in the fields. Put that in perspective for you. Nationally, all 200 food banks, part of Feeding America, gave out 3.3 billion pounds of food from all of our food sources, food industry, government, food drives, produce, whatever. So to give you a sense of there's that much more fresh food out in the fields, our job is to get it from the fields to the people that are hungry, or as I like to say, from the farm to the fork.
I like that. So what are some ways that we can end hunger in our community?
There's a couple things that I think are important. I mean, the introduction you did around the Food Innovation Center to me is huge when you realize the connectivity that we can have, and I have the privilege of serving on their advisory panel, and to make that work. But for us, it's really beginning to look at things 2 different ways. So we redid our strategic plan just recently around this concept of fresh food and around the idea that if you think about our plan, it's simple. It's feed the line. We all know what lines of food look like. We all have images. I don't think there's too many people here that remember the Depression, but we have those black and white pictures, from people standing in lines. And for us, it's a recognition that we can do more, but we can't end this, nor do you want us ending hunger by more and more people going to food pantries and getting their food. We want to make people food secure. So we have this image of ending the line as our second strategy. And we have this wonderful picture that we use where we actually have a grocery store line of people, and I think because they were so busy, they had a sign up that said end of line, where to go to get in line. For us, that's the ultimate goal. So what we redid around our mission was the idea of saying, we're going to end hunger one nourishing meal at a time. That's us getting that 3 to 6 billion pounds of fresh produce out and to people that are hungry. So we're going to look at about a 70% increase in our ability to move food, and it's going to be in fresh, which makes the Food Innovation Center and production and all those kind of issues, something that we want to explore. The other half of our mission is how do we co-create a community where everyone thrives? And that really is a tall order, but it's taken that. If all of you remember, the partnerships puts out the annual survey they do with community research partners, and we happen to have the highest poverty rate of all the 16 cities in that study. Places like Chicago and Cleveland do not have as high a rate as we do. And so it's a case for us, rather than talking about ending poverty, we want to turn that on its head. Say, how do we build off our strengths that this community is really good at, and how do we really, in a situation where everybody thrives? And so we're going to work this year to begin to engage the community in a conversation, hoping they'll close the other half. We'll close half of that gap that I talked about, with bringing in more fresh food, but we really want folks, to entertain it. How do we really put people back to work? How do we really have conversations around living wage? How do we make sure people have access to health care and to housing, child care, those kinds of issues that some of us take for granted, but a lot of people are struggling with. So that's the way we think it really is a case where we think we can do both.
It's impossible to be comprehensive as Matt, so let's just say that is a wonderful answer. But I'll just point out that Ohio is one of the unique states in that it is a major food economy, and it's a $23 billion industry. And if we can make ending food insecurity profitable by partnership with private sector or using innovative technologies, that's part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Lee, I understand that the Food Innovation Center connects with about 14 colleges at Ohio State. Someone who was at the university for about 8 years, that is simply amazing. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you've been able to connect your work not only across campus, but across the community with local partners like MidOhio Food Bank?
All right, here's the toss-up. How many colleges are there at Ohio State?
17.
You know the old answer. There used to be 17. Mergers, acquisitions occurred. There are 14 colleges at the Ohio State University, so all 14 colleges are fully engaged in the Food Innovation Center mission. So I have to explain, even to my own colleagues, that we're not just agriculture, we're not just a college of food, ag, environmental sciences. We represent the interests of all the faculty, currently 335 members, going strong and growing. And that's because food is a very compelling need, as I said earlier. But the other thing that the university has done, and we can debate whether or not it was wise to privatize parking at the Ohio State University, but that's not the focus today.
That's a whole forum in itself.
That's my next meeting. But we got $483 million up front for the privatization of a non-academic core resource. And wisely, the university is reinvesting that resource in the faculty. There's going to be an increase in 10 to 17% hiring over the next 10 years. That hiring's not going to go willy-nilly. They're going to invest in strategic areas of importance. You can guess what those areas might be. One is health. We have a world-class cancer hospital and research center. Two is sustainability, because of our ability to understand things like water balance, carbon, global warming. But the third area, which is just shocked the heck out of me, is food. We have a major land grant, the largest land grant university in the country, who's saying food is critically important to the future of society, and we're going to gather the the faculty horsepower and the intellectual horsepower to get it right. And I think that's bodes well for the future of Ohio as well as academically.
What I think, from my perspective, when you look at this from a community, organization, all my days at City Hall, I was always trying to figure out how to tap the right people at the university for the right reason, and how difficult that is given the size. When you think about the fact that through the Food Innovation Center, we have the ability to draw on people very quickly and to draw all the different folks from the different colleges together to work on an issue. From my perspective, that's you, who has a limited amount of time, and to engage the university, but be able to collectively pull that work together. So, we've already begun. Diane is sitting up front, my wife, who I always forget to introduce, but she has been a fabulous partner. As we spend way too much time talking about food. She's a nutritionist by training, But she also landed us an $800,000 diabetes grant. We're one of 3 food banks in the country that's doing diabetes and food insecurity work, and so they're running that study for us at Ohio State. You know, the cancer docs that Dr. Lee mentioned, you know, are curious about whether or not people are getting, you know, cancer screenings, you know, that are food insecure, and so how do we connect there? You know, we got a social work, you know, professor whose specialty happens to be food insecurity, who came here, you know, because of the connections we have in the community. So it's an opportunity for us to really tap these resources in a collective way, in a way that's a lot easier. You know, I told Dr. Gee it's probably the best example I can give him of one university. It really is. It's a case where, you know, we really have collective, and it makes it easier on us on how to engage the community and connect the university and the community together.
Matt, you talked about the amount of fresh food that is distributed by the food bank, which was something I quite frankly didn't realize. Can you tell us a little bit more about how food banking has changed since the food bank was started 33 years ago?
You know, I started in 1984 when I was 5, and literally, when you think about food banking, it really has always had a core mission, and that was to connect the surplus food in this country, which is tremendous amounts, to people that are hungry. That's a pretty simple mission, you know, in terms of doing that. What's changed over the years, we all have keychains with little tags on them now, so the food industry has gotten very efficient, you know, in terms of all the packaged goods that they have, you know, because they know, they like to tell me Walmart knows every 15 minutes what store sales are throughout their entire system back in Bentonville. You know, so they can get pretty good at predicting. And so we were always designed to collect the surplus. There's been less and less in that industry that are dry packaged goods. The good news for us, though, is there's a tremendous amount of fresh food. You know, and how do we connect fresh food? When you think about what I often say to folks is when you think about the fact that access to fresh food isn't necessarily proximity to the grocery store. It's whether you can afford it. You know, and if you can't afford it, it doesn't matter how close the grocery store is. So it's a case where our ability to connect, and just to give you a simple, you know, we brought in 16 million pounds of fresh produce last year. Our average cost of bringing that into Ohio is 17 cents a pound. Now go in and try to buy it. It's basically paying the picking, the packing cost of the farmer, and the ability to then transport it. Half the produce is grown in California, so we got a long transportation bill. But our ability to bring a lot of fresh produce into this community, most of that's in very simple items that people know what. They always ask me, do people know what to do with it? And the reality of it is when you're talking about apples and potatoes and sweet potatoes and carrots, you know, and oranges and cabbage, most of the time people know what to do with those items. You want to talk about rutabagas and turnips and beets? Yeah, that's a little more difficult. But most of it's not that. It really is basic, you know, commodities. And our world's upside down. When you think about food banking, it's cheaper for me to distribute a bag of apples to you than it is to get you a can of applesauce. So when you think about it from our standpoint, you know, fresh food's expensive at the grocery store, but in our world, if we can have the dollars to collect it, we have the ability. So we're changing. I'm leading a national effort to acquire 1 billion pounds more fresh produce for food banks to get it out of the fields and get it, you know, to people that are hungry. So that's the challenge that we have. That's the beauty. Our whole business model's changed. So if you think about it, a normal food pantry, we have some wonderful Lutherans here, and some of our star pantries are here. Scott was here from Westerville Warm, I saw as well. We've got these wonderful partners who for years have built a model, 3-day supply of food. You know, put the 9 meals together for 3, some have gone 5, some have gone 7 days. When you think about that, you know, our wonderful nutritionist on staff created a thing called a pantry panic. For her, she was teaching people what to do when you open your pantry doors and some of the shelves are empty. There's some foods and how to make a meal. For me, when I saw her explanation, it was like, that's really what most of our people have. They have some food. So why are we trying to provide as if it's empty? Why don't quit buying food that's costing me 50 to 75 cents a pound and try to get more fresh food into people's hands, which is not in their diet because of cost. So this includes meat from the retail stores. It includes dairy, it includes yogurt, you know, milk, all kinds of things in addition to the produce. So our ability to bring that product in, but the reality is none of us buy our produce or our milk once a month. You know, but that's the typical thing when you go to a pantry. It's once or twice a month. So we've revamped our model, and Lutheran's partnering with us, Broad Street, to let people come back every week and get fresh food. You know, to let them come in as often as they can and to pick up that food and get it into their diets more. So for us, we think that's a whole new way of doing business, but it's a whole new way for us to really impact the health of the clients that we're trying to work with.
So in my opening comments, I talked about the 40% increase that we'll need to see in food production. What happens if we don't meet this goal? And that's to either of our panelists.
Well, we have to be a little optimistic and believe we can do it, but it's not just production alone, because we do produce enough right now to feed most people. It's production and processing. It's something that the cave dwellers discovered, that when the winter comes, they have to put something away so they can make it to the next spring. And certainly that's one of the earliest reasons why we invented things like beer. It's a way to keep grain in an enjoyable form for times of lean. And that's basically what the food bank is doing, is looking at innovative ways to process and preserve. All processed foods aren't bad. Actually, when people travel overseas, we do the 3 Ps. If you can peel it, package it, or process it, then it's likely to be safer to eat year-round than if not. So we can do a little more of this.
I think from our perspective as well, this is something we're real curious. There's a wonderful project that's being researched in Wyland Park, in terms of can they create a food production facility. Is there an opportunity with all of the wonderful expertise that Ken and the team at Ohio State has to really say, is that really doable in a community? Could we create an economy and jobs, around creating, good product that's produced in this community right here? I mean, as Dr. Lee mentioned, this is agriculture is the #1 industry in this state. Most people wouldn't think that. So the question is, how do we turn that into healthy food? How do we turn that into jobs? And and do it right here in the middle of Wyland Park. It's a unique opportunity we have to really think about a lot of different ways. One of our challenges is in Ohio, when the produce comes, it tends to come in a very short window. So when the guy tells me they've got 30 acres of tomatoes left over, and we're trying to move 30 acres of tomatoes very quickly, at the same, we'd love to can them, process them, do some. Well, at the same time, Herzl Canning up in Northwest Ohio is running full bore canning. So how do we extend the life? So what are the strategies we can use with the Food Innovation Center to figure out what are the opportunities to extend the life of the product, in whatever format that takes. Hopefully the least cost model we can come up with, but that's some of the things that we need to think about doing.
And don't forget, the state beverage of Ohio is tomato juice, and that's because of the great processing and tomato packaging industry that we have in the state. But there's more than just canning tomatoes. It's another example of another branch of food discovery, and that it becomes a functional food, whereas the lycopene, or red color of tomato, could actually have health-promoting properties. And we have investigators at the university right now that are looking at soy tomato blends that actually prevent some forms of cancer, like prostate cancer in men. So these are very promising studies. It's healthful, it's economic, and it's fun to eat these kinds of foods.
How do we communicate that to people? If you have a choice between, your less healthy snack and your healthier snack option, how do we encourage people to kind of change their thinking about what they reach for, the apple versus the bag of potato chips?
Diane, you want to come up here and answer that question?
She's the expert.
I'm going to be guessing here in terms of strategies. From my perspective, I think from our world, one of the things that we want to do, and we are doing around this food, as I mentioned, our world's upside down with the apples and the applesauce. We get meat donated, we get carrots and potatoes donated, so I use that as my wonderful example to teach crock-pot cooking. Something as simple as that. And when Amy, our nutritionist, said, why do you, and when she got real excited, I actually had the same idea. The conversation really was around, how do I make it convenient? As convenient as going to basically McDonald's or someplace, in this case Wendy's, to eat all the time, to eat. How do I do that so that you get this healthy meal, you get something that's simple, you could teach the kids to do it. That's the kinds of things that we want to continue to get people to. We all need to do this. So this is not a case of, this is a food insecure issue, with folks that don't have enough to eat. This is a case where all of us are supposed to be eat more. I told them the reality of what they did. I often told Amy what I really wanted to have happen was make nutrition mainstream, because when you start talking carbs and proteins and grams, to me, it doesn't mean a thing. I assume it doesn't mean to most of you, it doesn't mean anything. But if you really, but you see the My Plate versus the pyramid, and half of that's supposed to be fruits and vegetables, that's a little easier image. So it's beginning to teach that, creating healthy snacks in schools. Every opportunity we get to do that, everybody says it's more expensive. They said that about when I built a LEED certified building too, that it would be more expensive. It really wasn't at the end of the day. I think we can begin to teach a little differently.
We could do a whole day just on good food, bad food. I think there's no such thing as junk foods, just food junkies. Your 12th apple, is that necessarily good for you? As it's not as good as your 12th bag of chips, okay? It's the overconsumption of any single item that can get you in trouble. We have kinds of food policy in this country where most foods are wholesome and healthy. We don't have horse meat, at least yet, not yet, in the American food supply. Melamine didn't come from an American processor, it came from overseas. Food safety is a big interest of the Food Discovery and Food Innovation Center. But what we can do is have information or science, evidence-based decisions about the quality of our foods. And that's what we stand for at the university is let's make the right nutritional decisions, but let's base it on real studies that show real benefit.
Part of my work at the university was around community development in a specific neighborhood, and in this neighborhood there were a lot of community gardening activities. And so I'm wondering from your perspectives, what role does community gardening have in this conversation?
Community gardening, to me, is a wonderful opportunity to engage folks at a level, because you can teach people how to do things very simply in their own, even if they don't have a garden, how to grow it. I saw some wonderful examples from our pantries that are using those little plastic swimming pools, and they've been able to turn those into gardens. You know, I think in terms of, you know, it's teaching people to grow their own food, how much they can grow, regardless of what size piece of property they have. I had a really good friend who's come in. I do some leadership work up in Canada, and he flew in here a couple years ago for a leadership conference we had at Ohio State, and he was stunned by the number of backyards that is, as he was landing, that were just grass. You know, in his world of living off the land and a sustainable forest, you know, up there, it was like, why are we just growing grass? So I think part of it's that. For us, one of the things we're now experimenting with and are putting together, trying to help, and there's a wonderful version of this in the Franklinton Gardens, which is how to bring urban agriculture to Central Ohio. So there's a wonderful donor in town, and we're partnering with Church for All People on the south side to see if we can, in fact, start large-scale hoop house kind of production. So it's farm production more so than just gardening. So we really want to experiment. As I keep telling people, you don't have to do that on dirt. You can do that on asphalt. You know, you can build these kind of structures, and we can really get back. They keep telling me the local food movement and the restaurants in particular are looking for more and more and more fresh food grown locally. So can we create economic development and jobs and really make this sustainable and viable? So for us, I think that's a wonderful way to take what started with community gardening, which tends to be on a lot of the plots, and frankly is hard to do. You got a champion usually leading that work. When the champion gets tired, moves, whatever, somebody has to sustain that work. So, you know, from us, can we create this in a way to get people to understand? You know, Metro High School does a wonderful job. You've ever been to the food bank and see our wonderful garden on the side of our space? It was designed, it's raised bed gardens, solar panels, rain barrels, designed by juniors in high school. Much better science project than I had, which was just a yellow poster, you know, kind of thing. But it wasn't even it was a math project because I didn't like my chemistry teacher. But seriously, I mean, it's an opportunity for us to really rethink about where our food comes from, teaching young people to do that. They've been doing that in Wyland Park. We partnered with the YMCA to do Hoover Y Park. There's 3 acres out there that they're growing food. Local Matters was helping to teach nutrition education and how to use the foods. So there's all these wonderful ways to really get people to think about where your food comes from and how to do that in space that you would never, you know, realize how small it could be and produce a lot of good food.
At the United Way of Central Ohio, we have an initiative in our health impact area called Fresh Foods Here. And our health impact director, Dave Saccone, is here, along with our volunteer, Jill Clark from Ohio State, who helps to lead that work. And for those of you that might not be familiar, Fresh Foods Here is a pilot project where in Franklinton we've identified 3 corner stores where a lot of people do their shopping, and we have fresh produce in those stores. And I just have a few statistics that I think are really telling. Through some surveying that we did, Franklinton surveys revealed at least 90% of the stores sell eggs and milk, while less than 50% carry fresh produce, with only 5% stocking carrots, 10% stocking bananas, and 30% offering apples or potatoes. So through this pilot project, we were able to increase the healthful food purchases by about 38% in 3 corner stores, and we'll be expanding that to about 7 stores in the Franklinton area this fall. So I'm wondering, how can we grow these kinds of opportunities and options for people in other neighborhoods around the city where we know there's an absence of large food retailers in central city neighborhoods? how can we get these foods into stores where people are having to do their shopping?
Well, there's an implied, in your question, you said healthful and local, and that's actually desired. But not all local foods are healthy. And you have to base this on evidence, and that is where you do nutritional analysis of fresh foods and say something that's heat labeled like vitamin C. That degrades quickly, depends on how it's handled and stored. Certainly, the local food movement is one of culture. You certainly want to encourage people to understand food production. You certainly can trust people that you know who produce the food rather than somebody who's anonymous, maybe half a nation away or perhaps out of the country entirely. But it was interesting. I had a discussion just a couple nights ago with a winner of one of our prize winners, Harris Award winner, who is a respected scientist at Louisiana State University, which of course is in New Orleans. And the issue of local foods came up, and he said to me, did you remember the fresh spinach outbreak, which was in California? And I said, yes. And he said, did you see the movie Beasts of the Southern Wild? Which I did. And if you ever saw that movie, you realize that the beasts, there's several beasts in that movie, but one of them is the wild pig. And that's really the source of contamination that occurred with the spinach that came out of California, because the pigs were running through the spinach fields, and of course the pigs were not sanitary. And he said, that's the major problem we have in New Orleans and Louisiana is wild pigs. And if you actually Google wild pig, wild boar, you'll find a lot of news reports out of Louisiana in New Orleans as they have to deal with the 450-pound pig that's somehow, on the highway or wherever. And these are real issues. So local foods has to be tailored to the community at large, and also you have to do it in a safe and wholesome way. And that's the other dimension of food discovery. We need to make sure that food is both enjoyable but is also free of harm.
In just a few minutes, I'll be opening the floor up to you for your questions, so please start to get those ready. Tell me a little bit more about how the actual partnership formed between the Food Innovation Center and the MidOhio Food Bank.
Wow, mutual respect, I believe. We knew about the great efforts of MidOhio Food Bank going back 20 years. I guess ever since you became the executive director, it's when you have a clear-thinking, articulate spokesperson like Matt, it's like it's just there. You want to associate with that kind of activity. But it's also, MidOhio is one of the largest food banks in the area. He gives leadership to the Feeding America. And it was always a compelling partnership. Food science has the kinds of technological as well as academic expertise I think that Food Bank can capitalize on. We're talking about how to keep food safer, fresher, longer, healthy, free of harm, and those are all things that I think Food Bank needs, we benefit from that partnership.
And I was blessed as well, just in terms of the folks that we know at Ohio State. Obviously, Diane works there, and her connection with nutrition and the research that she's doing and what's going on there tied into that, connected to the cancer docs that we knew as well. Melinda Swan, who was my chief of staff at City Hall, went to work at Ohio State. So the connections began to grow as this began to form. It really was for me, and it was always this question that I've said before that I had about how do you connect with 14 different colleges when you want to tap into the expertise, particularly if the expertise is in a professor in a certain, I didn't even know that. So this for us became a natural way and a natural partnership. And it's also a recognition for us that, we've really moved recently into food as health. And so as we start to explore what that means, some people even go as far as say food is medicine. And so as we start to explore that, for us now it's measuring the impact of our work. It's not just about the output of more pounds, more pounds, more pounds. That's our measurement in food banking. But it really is, what's the impact of our work on education? There's a lot of work, Children's Hunger Alliance, a lot of folks have done work around the impact of hunger on education, the impact of hunger on health. The diabetes study to us is huge. How do you manage your diabetes if you don't have the right food to eat, you're food insecure? Or as I happen to chair Mount Carmel's board, and I tell the docs, we're writing these, when you're discharged from a hospital, and they go to great lengths now to make sure you've got a discharge plan. and all the things you're supposed to do with your medicines, they never ask you whether you got food at your house to eat. Primary care docs don't screen for food insecurity. It's not on their thinking to do that, but yet that could be a major impact of what's going on. So as we start to move to prevention, as a way of health, food plays a humongous role in that. And I also would submit to you, because half the people we help work, that the impact that hunger has on workforce, it's huge. I mean, every company that comes to the food bank in our big meeting space to meet, I will walk in and say, I can't prove this, but I can pretty much guarantee you somebody in your organization's using a food pantry. And with all the changes, we had a 40% explosion in suburban hunger. Dublin's one of my largest food pantries in our system. Westerville, Warm in Westerville, 3 in Worthington, trying to start a second pantry in New Albany. We opened ours in Grove City. It's the 3rd largest pantry in our system. So hunger has hit the burbs, and so it's a case, which means it's having an impact on our workforce. So as you look at all those issues, to have a global approach to that from the Food Insecurity Center in terms of how to take that kind of global look at the issue, gives us the ability to change, to redo our thinking, and to really try new things.
I like that, Food Insecurity Center. We need to go there.
As we always do at the Metropolitan Club, we save time for questions from the audience. CMC records our forums for statewide broadcast on the Ohio channel. They are also available on YouTube through the CMC website. While at the microphone, please introduce yourself, and we thank you in advance for not making long editorial comments.
We get to do that.
That is what they made me say. Jane Scott.
Hi, I'm Jane Scott, and I have to say I'm bursting with pride today because two of my favorite people and things, as far as the Columbus Metropolitan Club and my alma mater, Ohio State University College of Agriculture. Thank you very much. I'm curious, no one has mentioned some things that would have been germane to my upbringing on a farm and also to my mom and my grandmother's way of thinking, and that's the extension, teaching them how to preserve food from their gardens that was coming in bumper crops in a week or two. And also, is there a role for 4-H in the urban community to teach children that maybe aren't involved with basketball or ballet how to have 4-H clubs and community gardens? It seems like there are two huge resources that could provide tremendous leadership in those areas.
Real quick on the 4-H one in particular, the Pantry Panic that I mentioned that Amy, our nutritionist, she wrote it for 4-H. So that entire program was developed for the 4-H program to really look at how they can help, how they can do things, how they can look at, how to make foods out of the limited things that they have. So it was specifically targeted for them. So they have a wonderful vehicle now that does a lot of great things in tying into the 4-H program. Preserving is a little more of a challenge. Where I found that to be successful is when you can get the church groups to do it. So you go collectively into a church kitchen. Because you got to think about most of the people that we're helping that are really food insecure do not have the space in their kitchens to do much. They don't have, we all think, I often tell people we have to get out of our SUV drive to the grocery store mentality, because if you're getting on 2 COTA buses, to carry your food or go buy in bulk. Somebody once said to me, we just need a Costco in the inner city, and I went, you really need to think, that's a suburban middle class kind of approach to things, and if you only have one little refrigerator freezer, you got very limited ability to store there. You may not have storage in your, there's no pantry in most of these apartments, those kind of things. So it's really making sure we understand the limitations, and there's been some wonderful work done by the university in terms of research on the south side around all of those kinds of issues. And people once said that one of the best quotes I can remember out of all that, I take my kid to McDonald's because it's the safest playground in my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Yet we want people to get exercise. When you start in those kind of things, or I got to choose between a gallon of milk and 5 pounds of potatoes because I have a baby and I'm getting on a COTA bus to take the food home. So it's in that vein that makes it harder. So where we have found success with that particular issue is when you can get the churches, which are in all the inner cities, to really come together around that, and then you preserve it, and then you divide it up, and then you got a little bit going to everybody.
Hey, Jane, thanks so much for the reminder. We have a wonderful 4-H center right on campus, right near the food science building, but also annually we run 4-H competitions in food. So 4-Hers are an integral part of the food supply chain learning. We have a lot of education potential, but also it's a program that needs to move into the urban environments as well. It's not just a rural farming thing anymore. As we develop the urban urban growth, urban foods initiatives, we need to engage the youth in that. Extension is a big part of this stuff. We have incubator kitchens in almost every city now, and that's another way that we can reach out and extend our knowledge on things like home canning, particularly on high acid foods that can actually be done by 4-H youth and as well as the homemakers.
Amy.
Hi there, good afternoon. My name is Amy Boddicker, and my question follows Jane's a bit. We led with the idea of feeding a hungry world and talked about food insufficiency, but as you talked, you revealed a lot of overproduction, fresh food left in the field, and a lot of waste in that area. And as ag is the #1 industry in this state, it seems to me that there's some problem in our farming system if there is overproduction in that way. And I'm wondering how, besides the gleaning that Matt talked about, recovering the fresh food from the fields that's left unpicked, are there other ways that, innovative ways that we can be working with farms to address both this overproduction and perhaps redistribution of food? Thanks.
Oh, you're looking at me. There's a lot of technologies out there that are just wonderful. I don't want to imply at all, Amy, that the farmers being sloppy or not doing a good job at harvest. There's just deficiencies that exist, and there's also a culture which is changing now. We expect apples, for example, to continue the apple analogy, to be perfect and shiny without blemishes. Okay, we now know that regular produce coming off the tree is not always like that, and people are willing to buy apples with blemishes on it or don't look as perfect, and they're willing to pay more sometimes for things that are organic or grown without pesticides. And so these markets are proving to be profitable, and that's really what the farmer's in business to do. The farmer's in business to make a living, and there has to be a market for that kind of produce. And I think that's moving in the right direction. The other thing we need to do is process more. At one time, well, you know, if you think about it, food processing was invented by Napoleon Bonaparte, who needed a way to feed his troops in the middle of winter. And so it was a chef that won the prize of 12,000 francs because he figured out if you put it in bottles, which was what they had at the time, champagne bottles, and hammered corks into it, the troops that ate it, they didn't die. You know, they kept the fight. Well, today, we're still doing that. We're still making cans. We're making cans, but we're also putting in flexible packages and cardboards. But we're also doing innovative stuff like high-pressure processing, treatment with ozone. We're doing pulse electric field technologies. We're doing a lot of different things, microwave, that are innovative, and we have a revolution in the way that we preserve foods today, and that's a big focus at The Ohio State University. So we could do a whole nother day on that emerging technologies issue, but now is the time because we now have a huge array of technologies that are available to us to make the food last longer, be healthier, taste better, and that's where I think the promise lies.
And I think there's a wonderful opportunity with the farmers, you know, in terms of their excess. You know, to go back to Dr. Lee's point, in terms of what we saw as perfect, you know, we convinced the cut crop industry in California, who, for some reason, we've decided that's about the size of a head of broccoli. That's the perfect size. So if it's bigger than that, they were told not to touch it. You know, if it's smaller, they'll wait till the second cut, see if it gets big enough. But we've somehow got this image of what's perfect, and therefore, when they went in, we finally convinced them to cut it, because they trained them not to do that. When they went in and cut it, they got 7 tractor-trailer loads of broccoli off the first farm, you know, and that continued. And you know, and then they got cauliflower, and there were 18 more cut crops to go. So it's an idea that there's this, you know, California, they were selling, and some of my compadres around the network were all upset recently because somebody that was working with food banks convinced a grocer retailer in Northern California to sell smaller seconds of apples. And I was like, oh, this is going to kill our industry in terms of capturing this donated product. And I was like, are you kidding me? You know how many millions and billions of pounds we're talking about here? You know, it's not going to have any impact. And what better thing to do if somebody could afford to buy that bag of apples who couldn't afford to buy the other one, then great. So it doesn't, we get ideas in terms of what's perfect. You know, weather's an interesting variable in all of this. That's what tends to be such the big, you know, in a lot of ways the biggest variable. and what can happen. So when there's really good weather and they know they're going to have a bumper crop, we want to plan for that. We're not going in and glean with volunteers. We're paying the workers more to stay in the fields and get the food out for us when that happens. And then our challenge, and that's where the food production thing to me becomes important, because when all that happens at the same time, is there a way to use some technology and creativity and innovation to extend the life of that product that gives us that product more often? So that's where I think the partnership can exist.
Thank you. Our next question.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Andrea Salenbean. I'm an environmental attorney here in Columbus at McMahon Douglas. And before I began my legal career, I used to work in a lot of Columbus restaurants. And it was rather disgusting, the 10-pound chunks of prime rib and the Glad trash bags full of baked bread that would be thrown away at the end of the night or hauled to my parents' house, where we would call the family in the next day to enjoy that day-old bread. I remember inquiring at some of the restaurants, and they were saying, well, we don't do that. We don't want to lose control over our product. We're concerned about liability. I just wondered, does your organization, Mr. Habash, work with local restaurants to take some of those perfectly fine foods?
Yes, we have a program called Second Servings. So it's a prepared food recovery program. It's been in existence for probably 15 years now. And our experience historically has been is that it tends to work really well in the corporate cafeterias, the convention centers type of settings, hospitals. You're never going to get stuck in a hospital bed and not have food. So there's always excess there. Our experience primarily with the restaurants has been that it's been very, very sporadic. If you have a lot of excess food at a restaurant for very long, you're not in business. So it's an occasional thing, usually around the holidays. If you think about sauerkraut and pork at New Year's Day kind of thing, there's excess, those kind of things. So we will capture that. I will tell you there is a tremendous amount of bread in the community. There always was. I think the Atkins diet changed a lot of that. It's when all the bagel shops stopped. Prior to that, there was more. Everybody was throwing away bread, and there's more bread in the system than actually can be used. But the reality of it is we try to whenever we're made in contact, we've tried to connect with a restaurant or anybody that has prepared but unserved food. Not the only thing we don't do is pick up at the festivals at midnight when they're closing down for a variety of reasons, including I don't want my staff out at midnight on a holiday. But really that's probably one of the challenges we would have. But beyond that, the opportunity is there. And we deliver that direct. We ask them in a lot of cases to freeze it, or furnish the containers. We will pick it up. We do all kinds of safety, to go back to the food safety, temperature checks, make sure everything's maintained. We have refrigerated trucks to move all of this. And we deliver it direct to a residential feeding program, usually some type of shelter establishment, so a residential program. So it's been in existence for a long time. It's a connected one-on-one. So if there's an opportunity, if you know a particular restaurant, we would love to connect.
Andy.
Yes, hi, Andy Campbell. Quick question in regards to kind of the future changing Foodscape. Two things we've been hearing a lot about, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, but climate change and invasive species and how that might affect our food supply long term.
Wow, it's anyone's guess what climate change will do, because it's shifting. What it does, of course, is we saw recently with various natural weather events and natural disasters, is it's raising sea level, which actually causes people to retreat from perhaps the coastal areas. But as you know, people are just drawn to the coast for various reasons. Everyone wants to be proximate to water. I think as far as climate change goes, my wife and I always wanted to retire into a tropical area, but now we won't have to move.
It raises my costs greatly, because when it's 100 degrees out, our refrigeration is even more valuable as well. So I have two last things. One is I wanted to introduce Teresa Harris, who is our board chair from the MidOhio Food Bank, and my wonderful team that's here as well, because they do a phenomenal job of making me look good and do absolutely great work. And the final thing, I just want to put a plug in for something that we do. All of you have heard of Operation Feed, done it forever. It actually predates my time at the food bank, believe it or not. What we do with Operation Feed is 100% of those dollars go to acquire food. And we talk about that fresh food that's in the fields. We're going after a 40% increase in Operation Feed dollars this year. So if you're not running an Operation Feed campaign in your workplace, I would encourage you to do that. All of those dollars are going to go to things like helping us get this produce that's left in the fields to people that are hungry in this community. So That's my plug for a campaign that's been around a long time, but we all forget about it. We take it for granted. So if you're not doing that, we would encourage you to do that as an organization or as an individual, because it'll all go into this produce and into the food acquisition that we're doing.
Can I jump in with one quick question? I know we're on time, but I'm Susan with the Metropolitan Club. I'm wild about the work Jamie Oliver did in either it was West Virginia or Kentucky school system. He didn't seem to get much support. How do you feel? Do you have any sense of that? You're familiar with it. What are we going to do about the school system's feeding? Are we as in bad shape in the Columbus area school system in feeding our children as was that school system he worked with?
Bring Mary Lou up here and let her answer that question. I think the challenge is that has to come from the parents. At the ultimate end of the day, if you want to change the food systems in our schools, it's going to come from the parents saying we want. But that also means you got to reinforce that at home. So it's a challenge all the way around. Jamie can be eccentric, and he gets out there a little bit. But at the same time, I think his message is real. That we've got to change the way and what we're eating and the quantities we're eating. I've been trained that there's no such thing as bad food. It's how much you eat. I think that's a reality of this good food. We got to get out of the good food, bad food debate and really start to say, how do we just encourage, all of us eating better foods, and where can that show up in so many different ways? And the schools are clearly one. When you think about, during the school year, you can get as many as 3 meals a day, at a school. So it's an opportunity to really make sure that our kids get nutrition. And we've got to continue to work on the strategies that we have within the schools. But it's clearly not my expertise in terms of going. As I said, I could probably get Mary Lou up here and she could talk about it.
Hey, Susie, you make a great point. That there's a political dimension to it. You got to work with the people that actually write the regs as to what's allowable to be fed in schools. Certainly, parent involvement is hugely important. And also the industry involvement, getting the soft drinks out of the schools that you can actually engage the companies to do alternatives. And I think that's a great question.
I think if I remember right, Granville's increase was about 10% in cost, I think, to go to the healthy food choices that they chose to put in place there, if I'm remembering that story from a few years ago. I think that's about right. So there is a cost increase, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of opportunities to change the way we do business and think.
Before I turn the microphone back over to my friend Todd, Matt's last point about the school district reminds me of something I heard our superintendent say once. It was a wintry day, and she was criticized for not closing the schools, and she said the reason why she didn't close the schools was because it was either a Friday or a Monday, and that meant some of her students would go 3 days without having anything to eat. And that has always stood with me and has been such a powerful statement that our superintendent has to think about whether or not her children have eaten, our children have eaten. And so I just want to thank both Matt and Ken for the work that you're doing to make sure our superintendent doesn't have to make those kinds of decisions. So thank you.
I want to first thank our program committee for putting this forum together. Obviously, it's an important topic. Food security is an important issue in our community. Don, thank you so much for providing such a thoughtful and insightful moderation for this panel. And Matt, thank you so much for being a national leader here locally and local leader. And Dr. Ken, thank you so much. Dr. Ken Lee, thank you so much for leading at the Innovation Center and justifying my beer consumption. Appreciate that. I hope you enjoyed today's forum. You can see it again and share it with others on YouTube, which is linked to our CMC website. You are welcome to continue today's conversation with the speakers over coffee and cookies, not broccoli or carrots, out in the lobby. Don't forget that we recycle our name tags, our name badges. And if you want to be included in our emailing list, please put your business card in your name badge, insert before dropping it off in the basket. Thank you all. Thank you for being here, and thank you again to CMC Forum.